Steam rose from Linda Morrison's coffee cup as she scrolled through her phone on a crisp October morning in her Manhattan penthouse. The autumn sun cast long shadows across her pristine marble floors, highlighting the stark minimalism of a space that had been featured in 3 design magazines but never felt like home. The city stretched endlessly below her floor-to-ceiling windows, a concrete jungle she had conquered through sheer determination and countless 18-hour workdays that had cost her more than she'd ever admitted to herself. At 58, she had built an empire from nothing. Her tech consulting firm, now worth $47 million, with offices in 12 cities and a client roster that read like a Fortune 500 directory. But success felt hollow when your only child treated you like a stranger, when your penthouse echoed with silence, when the awards lining your office walls couldn't fill the void where a family should be. The notification from Instagram made her pause mid-sip. A photo from her sister Janet showed a cream-colored invitation with elegant gold lettering. "Join us for Michael's housewarming celebration." Linda's heart skipped as she read the date: this Saturday, just 3 days away. Her son Michael, 28 now, had finally bought his first apartment in Brooklyn Heights. Pride and hurt warred in her chest as she realized she was learning about this milestone through social media, the same way she'd learned about his college graduation party, his first job promotion, and his relationship with Sarah. The expensive coffee imported from some boutique roastery her assistant Margaret had recommended suddenly tasted bitter in her mouth. Here she was in a penthouse that cost more than most people made in a lifetime, learning about her son's achievements through Instagram like some distant acquaintance. She immediately called Janet, her hands trembling slightly as she dialed. "I can't believe Michael bought a place. When did this happen? Why didn't he tell me?" "Oh, honey." Janet's voice carried an uncomfortable pause that made Linda's stomach clench. "You didn't get an invitation?" Linda's coffee grew cold as the reality sank in. The bustling sounds of Manhattan morning traffic, 42 floors below, seemed to fade into white noise. "What do you mean?" "Linda, I assumed you already knew. The whole family's going. Even Uncle Robert from California flew in for this. Cousin Marie is driving up from Philadelphia and, well, Amanda got one too." Amanda, Michael's father's new wife, married to David for barely 2 years. The woman had an invitation to her son's milestone celebration, but she, his mother, did not. Linda felt as though someone had reached into her chest and squeezed her heart with an icy fist. "Janet, are you sure? Maybe it got lost in the mail? You know how unreliable the postal service can be? It was hand-delivered, sweetie. Michael dropped them off personally last week. He spent almost an hour at my place telling me all about the apartment. He was so excited, Linda. He's been saving for this for years. Years. Her son had been working toward this dream for years, and she knew nothing about it." Linda ended the call and sat in stunned silence, her reflection ghost-like in the window against the backdrop of Central Park. Outside, joggers moved along the paths. Couples walked hand in hand. Families pushed strollers, all of them connected to each other in ways that seemed to elude her. When had the distance between her and Michael grown so vast? Was it after the divorce 7 years ago, when the custody battles had torn their family apart like a corporate acquisition gone wrong? The way David had painted her as the workaholic mother who chose boardrooms over bedtime stories, who measured love in stock options rather than stolen moments. The way she'd thrown herself even deeper into work afterward, building her company, as if success could somehow prove she'd made the right choices. That sacrifice had been worth something. She remembered the exact moment she'd realized how far apart they'd grown. Michael's high school graduation, where she'd arrived 20 minutes late because of a conference call with investors in Tokyo. She'd found him afterward, still in his cap and gown, accepting congratulations from David and his new girlfriend now, wife Amanda. Michael had hugged her dutifully, thanked her for the expensive watch she'd given him, and then turned back to his conversations with friends she'd never met. She'd driven home that night wondering when her son had become a polite stranger. She pulled up Michael's contact and stared at his number. When was the last time they'd spoken? His birthday 3 months ago, a stilted 5-minute conversation where he thanked her for the expensive Apple Watch she'd sent. The same watch she later saw him selling on Facebook Marketplace with the caption, "Never worn, still in box." The sight had stung, but she'd told herself he probably needed the money more than the watch. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. What could she say? "Son, why wasn't I invited to celebrate the biggest moment of your adult life?" The words felt pathetic even in her head. "Did you forget you have a mother? Too bitter?" I saw Janet's Instagram post. To passive-aggressive instead. She opened her laptop and began researching. Michael Morrison, 847 Riverside Terrace, Brooklyn Heights. Unit 4B, the building was a converted warehouse. All exposed brick and large windows, trendy and expensive for someone just starting out. How was he affording it on his graphic designer salary? Had David helped him? The thought made her stomach twist with a familiar cocktail of jealousy and inadequacy. Linda spent the next 2 hours diving deeper into public records, utilizing the same research skills that had made her company millions. Property records, mortgage information, building ownership details, tax assessments, previous sales history. The building was owned by Riverside Heights LLC, a small real estate investment company that managed 3 modest properties in Brooklyn. She found Robert Chen's business license, his wife's obituary from 2 years ago, articles about his family's immigration story in the local Brooklyn newspaper. By afternoon, she had a complete dossier on Robert Chen, 64 years old, widowed, 2 children living in California who worked in tech and showed no interest in real estate. His wife Helen had been a teacher. Together, they'd built a small but stable rental business focused on providing affordable housing to young professionals. Robert was clearly approaching retirement with no succession plan, no family members interested in continuing the business. Linda felt a familiar thrill, the same sensation she got when identifying a promising acquisition target or spotting a gap in the market. This wasn't just about buying a building. This was about understanding every angle, every pressure point, every reason why Robert Chen might be ready to sell. I need you to find everything you can about Riverside Heights LLC. Who owns it? What other properties they have, financial records if possible, and I need it by end of day. Certainly, Ms. Morrison. Is this for a potential acquisition? Linda paused, staring at the photo of Michael's invitation still glowing on her phone screen. In it, she could see part of his apartment hardwood floors, exposed brick, a plant hanging by the window. It looked warm and inviting, the kind of home she'd never made time to create. Yes, she said quietly. You could say that. That evening, Margaret's research painted a clear picture. Riverside Heights LLC was a small company owned by Robert Chen, a 64-year-old first-generation immigrant who owned 3 modest buildings. In Brooklyn, the company was profitable but not thriving, and Robert was nearing retirement with no succession plan. His wife had passed away 2 years ago, and his children lived in California with no interest in the family business. Linda made another call. Robert Chen, this is Linda Morrison from Morrison Tech Solutions. I'd like to discuss a business proposition regarding your Riverside Heights properties. Morrison Tech Solutions. Robert's voice carried a slight accent and genuine surprise. The Morrison Tech Solutions. What could you possibly want with my little buildings? I'm diversifying into real estate investments. Your properties caught my attention. Would you be available to meet tomorrow? As Linda lay in bed that night, she stared at the ceiling of her bedroom, a stark modern space that had been featured in Architectural Digest but had never felt like home. She thought about Michael's childhood bedroom in their old house in Westchester before the divorce. Baseball trophies on the shelves, glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, drawings taped to the walls. She remembered standing in the doorway watching him sleep, promising herself she was working so hard to give him a better future. When had the future become more important than the present? When had providing for him become more important than being with him? Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hi Linda, this is Amanda. I hope it's okay that David gave me your number. I wanted to reach out about Michael's party. I think there might have been some kind of misunderstanding. Linda stared at the message for a long time before deleting it without responding. She didn't want Amanda's pity or her attempts to smooth over what was clearly an intentional slight. If Michael didn't want her at his celebration, she wouldn't beg for inclusion, but she also wouldn't be excluded from his life entirely. The next morning, Linda sat across from Robert Chen in a small Brooklyn coffee shop just 2 blocks from Michael's building. The cafe was nothing like the upscale establishments she usually frequented. Mismatched chairs, local artwork on the walls, the smell of fresh-baked muffins mixing with espresso. Robert was a gentle man in his 60s, wearing a cardigan that had seen better days and wire-rimmed glasses that he constantly adjusted. His eyes held the weariness of someone ready to step back from decades of landlord responsibilities. Ms. Morrison, I have to ask why. Are you interested in my little buildings? Your company works with Fortune 500 clients? You've been featured on the cover of Forbes. This seems beneath your usual scope. Linda had rehearsed this moment, but sitting across from Robert's kind, weathered face, her practiced pitch felt hollow. I'm looking to diversify into real estate, steady rental income streams. Your buildings have excellent occupancy rates and are in a prime location. Robert nodded, slowly pulling out a manila folder thick with documents. The Riverside building, that's my crown jewel. Converted warehouse, 8 units, all occupied by young professionals. I put my heart into that renovation 5 years ago after my wife passed. She always said the building had good bones. Tell me about the tenants, Linda said, genuinely curious. Despite her ulterior motives, Robert's face lit up. Oh, they're wonderful people. Mrs. Rodriguez in 2A, she's a retired teacher who bakes cookies for everyone during the holidays. The young couple in 3C, Marcus and Jennifer, they're expecting their first baby in December. The graduate student in 1B, David Park. No relation to your son's father, he sometimes struggles with rent, but always pays eventually, and he helps the older tenants with their computers. He continued through the list, and Linda found herself genuinely touched by his obvious affection for these people. And Michael Morrison in 4B? Ah, Michael? Nice young man, very quiet. Pays on time every month. He's a designer, I think. He helped me create a new flyer for the building when the old photocopied one was getting embarrassing. Wouldn't take any payment for it? Said it was good practice. Robert smiled fondly. He waters Mrs. Rodriguez's plants when she visits her daughter in Florida. Good character, that one. Linda felt a complicated mix of pride and pain. This stranger knew more about her son's daily kindnesses than she did. I'm prepared to make a very generous offer, Linda said, sliding a folder across the table. Full cash purchase. Closing within 2 weeks. Robert's eyebrows shot up as he read the number. Ms. Morrison, this is 30% above market value. Are you sure this is correct? I value efficiency and certainty. No financing contingencies, no inspection periods, no repairs requested, a clean, fast sale. Over the next hour, Linda learned more about the building that would become her son's home than she'd learned about his life in years. Robert showed her photographs of the renovation process, shared stories about each unit, explained the building's quirks and charms, the heating system that required a gentle touch, the roof garden that the tenants maintained collectively, the way the afternoon light streamed through the large windows in winter. What will happen to them? Robert asked, his voice carefully controlled. These aren't just tenants to me, Ms. Morrison. They're people I've watched build their lives here. Mrs. Rodriguez taught my grandchildren to read before they moved to California. Marcus and Jennifer had their first date in the building's courtyard. I've been to baby showers and birthday parties and helped David Park move furniture up 3 flights of stairs more times than I can count. Nothing will change, Linda assured him, and she meant it. Same lease terms, same rent levels. I'm not interested in displacing anyone or maximizing profits. I just want a stable investment. Robert studied her face for a long moment. You remind me of my daughter, he said finally. Very driven, very successful. But she called me last week just to ask about my recipe for soup dumplings. When's the last time your son called to ask you about a recipe? The question hit harder than Robert probably intended. Linda couldn't remember Michael ever asking for her recipes. She couldn't remember having any recipes to share. 3 days later, Linda stood outside 847 Riverside Terrace, holding the keys to the building. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had spent $4.2 million to become her son's landlord. Perhaps the only way to ensure she remained part of his life, even if he didn't know it. The building was more beautiful than the photos had suggested. Red brick weathered to a warm patina, large windows that reflected the changing sky, fire escapes decorated with potted plants and string lights. A small courtyard garden bloomed with late-season flowers, and she could see why. Robert had fallen in love with the place. Margaret had prepared detailed files on each tenant, complete with rental history and emergency contacts. Michael's lease showed he'd moved in 6 months ago, paying $2,800 monthly for his 1-bedroom unit. His application listed his annual income as $48,000. Respectable for a freelancer, but not enough to afford this apartment without careful budgeting. His emergency contact was listed as David Morrison, his father. Linda wasn't mentioned anywhere that evening. Alone in her penthouse with Chinese takeout growing cold on her granite countertops, Linda made a decision. She would attend Michael's housewarming party, not as his estranged mother begging for inclusion, but as his new landlord conducting a routine building inspection. She had every legal right to be there, and no one could stop her from exercising that right. She spent Friday evening preparing like a general planning a campaign. Professional attire, navy blazer, matching slacks, comfortable flats for climbing stairs. Building inspection checklist downloaded from the city website, digital camera for documenting any maintenance needs, business cards identifying her as the new building owner. She practiced her explanation in the mirror. Routine quarterly inspection, ensuring all units were properly maintained, checking smoke detectors and emergency exits. Saturday arrived gray and drizzly. Typical October weather that matched Linda's mood. She spent the morning in her home office, pretending to review quarterly reports, while actually Googling building inspection protocols and landlord rights in New York. She felt ridiculous and desperate, and more nervous than she'd been before. any business presentation, she drove to Brooklyn in her black BMW, arriving at 3:30 p.m., 30 minutes before the party was scheduled to start. She parked across the street and watched as guests began to arrive, each person representing another reminder of how little she knew about her son's life. First came Janet and her husband Bill, carrying a large gift bag and laughing about something, probably sharing some family joke that Linda wasn't part of. Then Uncle Robert with his new girlfriend Patricia, both of them looking around admiringly at the neighborhood and taking photos with their phones. Several young people who must be Michael's friends arrived in a group, chatting animatedly about work and weekend plans and inside jokes that spoke of genuine friendship. An older couple with a casserole dish, neighbors, maybe, or family friends who had earned their place in Michael's life through years of small kindnesses Linda had never thought to offer. And finally, stepping out of a black SUV with tinted windows, David and Amanda. Linda watched them through her rearview mirror, noting how comfortable they looked together, how naturally David's hand found Amanda's back as he helped her navigate the uneven sidewalk. They moved like people who belonged, who had earned their place in this celebration through presence rather than obligation. Amanda looked younger than her 35 years, blonde and polished in a way that had always made Linda feel inadequate. During their few encounters, she wore a flowing dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and she moved with the confidence of someone who had never doubted her place in the world. David had aged well to still the charming man Linda had fallen in love with 25 years ago, before his midlife crisis and infidelity destroyed their marriage. Linda watched David help Amanda navigate the uneven sidewalk in her heels, his hand protective on her lower back. She remembered when he used to do that for her, back when they were young and still believed they could have it all. Linda waited until the lobby was clear, then used her master key to enter. The building's interior was even more impressive than she'd expected: exposed brick walls painted white, modern fixtures that complemented the industrial bones, wide hallways with original hardwood floors that gleamed under carefully placed lighting. Robert had truly transformed this space into something special. She could hear laughter and music drifting down from the 4th floor as she climbed the stairs. Her heart pounded with each step, and she wondered if this was how soldiers felt before battle, terrified and determined in equal measure. Unit 4. B's door was propped open with a decorative doorstop, and she could see into Michael's apartment. He had inherited her eye for design. The space was stylish but warm, with plants by every window and a gallery wall of artwork covering one exposed brick surface. She recognized some pieces from his college days, mixed with newer work that suggested his taste was evolving. A vintage leather sofa faced a wall-mounted television, and she could see part of a small kitchen with subway tile and brass fixtures. Through the crowd, she spotted him. Michael had grown into a handsome young man, tall like his father, but with her darker hair and serious eyes. He wore dark jeans and a button-down shirt in soft blue that brought out his eyes, and he was laughing at something Amanda was saying. Linda felt a stab of jealousy watching her son connect so easily with his stepmother, their conversation animated and comfortable. Amanda touched Michael's arm as she spoke, and he leaned in to hear her better over the music. They looked natural, together, like family, which Linda realized with a painful clarity they were. Amanda had been part of Michael's life for 3 years now, attending birthday dinners and holiday gatherings, probably offering advice about apartments and careers and relationships. Linda took a deep breath, straightened her blazer, and knocked on the doorframe. "Excuse me, I'm Linda Morrison, the new building owner. I'm conducting routine inspections today and wanted to ensure everything was in good order." The conversation nearest to the door stopped first, then the silence spread through the apartment, like ripples in a pond. Michael turned from his conversation with Amanda, and his face went through a series of emotions: surprise, confusion, recognition, and then a hardening she recognized all too well. "Mom." His voice was barely above a whisper, but in the sudden quiet of the apartment, everyone heard it. "What are you doing here?" "As I said, I'm the new owner of this building. I purchased it this week and I'm conducting routine inspections." "2. You bought my building." Michael's voice rose, causing several guests to exchange uncomfortable glances. "You bought my building?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Linda became acutely aware of every eye in the room focused on her, of the way Amanda's hand moved protectively toward Michael's arm, of Janet's mortified expression by the kitchen counter. David stepped forward, his face flushed with recognition and anger. "Linda, what the hell are you doing?" "I'm conducting a legal inspection of my property," Linda replied evenly, though her heart was racing so fast she wondered if people could see her pulse. "I wasn't aware there was a private gathering today." "This is insane," Michael said, running his hands through his hair in a gesture she recognized from his childhood, something he did when he was overwhelmed. "You bought my building because you weren't invited to my party?" That's completely unhinged, Mom." The room had gone completely quiet now, all 20-some guests witnessing this family drama unfold. Linda saw Janet's mortified expression, Amanda's shocked face, the uncomfortable shifting of Michael's friends who suddenly found themselves witnessing something intensely personal. She caught sight of Mrs. Rodriguez from 2A, peeking out from behind a group of young people, her eyes wide with curiosity and concern. "I think we should discuss this privately," Linda said, her voice carefully controlled despite the chaos in her chest. "No," Michael said firmly, his jaw set in a way that reminded her painfully of herself in difficult negotiations. "I think you should leave." Now the words hit Linda like physical blows. She had imagined many scenarios for this moment: anger, surprise, even grudging admiration for her boldness, but not this cold dismissal. Not the disgust in her son's eyes, not the whispered conversations already starting among the guests. "Fine," she said quietly, proud that her voice didn't shake. "But Michael, we need to talk soon." As she turned to leave, she heard David say to Amanda in a voice meant to carry, "This is exactly the kind of thing she used to pull during our marriage. This is why I had to get out. She can't just let people live their lives." Linda made it to the stairwell before the tears came, her carefully constructed composure crumbling as she descended the stairs she now owned. Behind her, she could hear the murmur of conversation resuming, voices carefully lowered but still audible in the echoing stairwell. "Is she always like that?" someone asked. "God, no wonder they don't talk," another voice replied. "Poor Michael. That was so awkward." By the time Linda reached the sidewalk, she was crying openly for the first time in years. She sat in her BMW for 20 minutes, sobbing into tissues from her glove compartment, watching through tear-blurred eyes as the party continued above. Through Michael's windows, she could see the silhouettes of people laughing and talking, celebrating her son's achievement without her. She had spent over $4 million and achieved nothing except confirming every terrible thing Michael probably thought about her. She was the controlling ex-wife, the absent mother, the woman who tried to buy her way into relationships instead of earning her place in them. As she finally drove away, Linda caught sight of Michael in his window, looking down at the street. For a moment their eyes met across the distance, and she saw something in his expression that wasn't anger or disgust. It looked almost like pity. Linda spent Sunday in her penthouse, moving from room to room like a ghost haunting her own life. The space that had once felt like a sanctuary now seemed cavernous and cold. She ignored the 17 missed calls from Janet, the dozens of text messages from family members who had witnessed her public humiliation, and the email from Margaret, asking if she needed anything for Monday's board meeting. The New York Times lay unread on her coffee table, alongside the Wall Street Journal and Forbes, publications that had once made her feel connected to the world but now seemed irrelevant. She found herself standing at her windows for hours, watching the city move below while she remained frozen in place. By Sunday evening, she had replayed the scene at Michael's apartment so many times that it had taken on the quality of a recurring nightmare. The shocked faces, David's cutting comment, Michael's cold dismissal. The way Amanda had moved protectively toward her son as if Linda were some kind of threat to be managed. Monday morning brought an unexpected visitor. Margaret knocked on her office door with an unusual expression, part concern, part curiosity. "Ms. Morrison, there's someone here to see you. He says he's your son." Linda's heart lurched so violently she wondered if she was having a heart attack. "Send him in." Michael walked into her corner office looking tired and angry. He wore jeans and a rumpled button-down shirt, his hair disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it, the same nervous gesture she'd noticed at the party. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he'd slept as poorly as she had. He stood by the window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline rather than at her. "So this is where the woman who bought my building works," he said bitterly. 42nd floor, corner office, $1 million view. Must be nice to have enough money to buy your way into your son's life. "Michael, do you have any idea how humiliating Saturday was?" He turned to face her, and she saw that his eyes were red-rimmed with exhaustion and emotion. "My friends think I have a psychotic mother. Amanda spent an hour asking David if you'd done things like this before, if this was part of some pattern of stalking behavior, and Janet ... Janet actually tried to defend you, which somehow made it worse, because even she couldn't really explain what you were thinking." Linda stood slowly, her legs unsteady. "I know you're angry." "Angry?" Michael's laugh was hollow and bitter. "I'm not angry, Mom. I'm devastated. I'm embarrassed. I'm confused about who you are and what you want from me. But mostly, I'm tired. I'm so fucking tired of trying to understand why my own mother can't just be normal." The profanity hit her like a slap. Michael rarely swore, and never in front of her. She realized how far outside the bounds of normal behavior she had pushed him. I want to be your mother, Linda said simply. I want to be part of your life. By buying my building. By crashing my housewarming party like some kind of real estate stalker? That's not being a mother. That's harassment. The word hung in the air between them like a toxic cloud. Linda sank back into her chair, feeling older than her 58 years. Through her office windows, she could see people in other buildings going about their normal workdays, meetings and phone calls and coffee breaks. While her world collapsed around her, "You didn't invite me," she said quietly. "To the most important celebration of your adult life, you invited everyone, including people you barely know, but not your mother." Michael was quiet for a long moment, and she could see him wrestling with something internal. His hands moved restlessly, tapping against his thighs, running through his hair, adjusting his shirt collar, all the nervous gestures he'd had since childhood that she'd tried to train out of him instead of understanding what they meant. "You really want to know why?" he finally asked. "Yes, because you don't actually care about my life. You care about being included in the big moments so you can feel like a good mother. So you can tell people at your business dinners that you have a close relationship with your son, but you don't know anything about me? That's not true. When did I start working at Morrison Creative Studio? What's my girlfriend's name? What neighborhood did I live in before Brooklyn Heights? What's my biggest fear? My proudest accomplishment? That isn't related to money or success. What's my favorite food? What makes me laugh? What keeps me awake at night? What's the last book I read? What's my favorite childhood memory that doesn't involve expensive presents?" Linda opened her mouth and realized she had no answers. The silence stretched between them like a chasm, filled with all the conversations they'd never had, all the questions she'd never asked, all the moments she'd missed while building her empire. She knew he was a graphic designer, but not where he worked. She knew he was dating someone, but hadn't bothered to learn her name. She had sent expensive gifts for birthdays and holidays, but couldn't remember the last time they'd had a real conversation about his dreams, his fears, his daily life. Michael continued, his voice getting quieter but more intense. "You sent me a $3,000 watch for my birthday. I returned it and used the money to pay for therapy because I've been struggling with anxiety and depression for 2 years. Did you know that? Did you know that Dad walked me through my first panic attack when I thought I was having a heart attack? Did you know that Amanda drove me to the emergency room at 2 a.m. when I couldn't stop throwing up from stress?" Each word was a knife twisting in her chest. Linda felt herself shrinking, becoming smaller and more insignificant with each revelation. "Did you know that I've been in therapy specifically to deal with the damage from growing up with a mother who was physically present but emotionally absent? Did you know that I spent my entire childhood feeling like I had to earn your attention by being perfect? By not needing anything? By never being inconvenient? I was trying to provide for you. I never needed you to be rich, Mom. I needed you to be present." Michael walked to her desk and sat down across from her. For a moment, he looked like the little boy he used to be, the child who would sit in this same chair during the rare occasions when she brought him to the office, spinning around while she finished phone calls and promised they'd go to lunch. "Soon, do you know why Dad really left?" Linda had always believed it was the infidelity, the midlife crisis, the younger woman. She shook her head. "He said he felt like he was married to a ghost, that you were physically there, but emotionally checked out, that even when you weren't working, you were thinking about work, that conversations with you felt like status meetings rather than intimate exchanges between husband and wife." Linda felt her chest tightening. "He cheated on me. Yes, he did. And that was wrong, and I've told him that. But Mom, he was lonely. We both were. Do you know how many school plays you missed? How many parent-teacher conferences Dad went to alone? How many times I fell asleep waiting for you to come home and read me a bedtime story?" The memories came flooding back. All the times she'd chosen work over Michael, telling herself she was building a future for him while missing his present. The science fair, where she'd arrived as the judges were packing up, the graduation dinner, cut short by a client emergency, the countless bedtime stories interrupted by phone calls she'd convinced herself were urgent. I thought I was being a strong woman, a role model. I thought I was showing you that women could have successful careers, and you did show me that. But you also showed me that success might mean being alone. That ambition might cost you the people you love most. I've spent 2 years in therapy, trying to figure out how to have a career without becoming you." The words were brutal in their honesty. Linda looked at her son, really looked at him, and saw not the ungrateful child she'd imagined, but a young man who had been wounded by her choices and was trying to heal. "The housewarming party was about celebrating the people who helped me get there," Michael continued. "Not just financially, but emotionally. People who know that I hate olives but love olive oil. People who've seen me cry. People who've sat with me when I couldn't get out of bed because the anxiety was too bad to function. I could have been one of those people, Linda whispered. When between your board meetings and international travel, between building your empire and showing up to my life 20 minutes late with your phone buzzing with work calls, Linda thought about all the moments she'd missed, all the time she'd been physically present but mentally elsewhere, the birthday dinners where she'd answered emails between courses, the weekend trips to museums where she'd spent half the time on conference calls, the way she'd always treated time with Michael like an appointment to be managed rather than a relationship to be nurtured. I don't know how to fix this, she admitted. I don't know if you can, Michael said. But buying my building isn't the answer. Grand gestures aren't the answer. I don't need you to prove you love me with money or power plays or dramatic interventions. What do you need? Michael stood up and walked back to the window, looking out at the city where they'd both built their lives in isolation from each other. I need to know that if I called you right now and said I was having a bad day, you'd actually listen instead of immediately trying to solve the problem or give me advice. I need to know that you're interested in my small, boring, everyday life, not just the milestone moments that make you feel like you haven't completely failed as a mother. Linda felt tears on her cheeks. I do want to know about your everyday life. Do you? Or do you see me as the thing that proves you can have it all? The son who validates your choices and shows the world that Linda Morrison can be a successful businesswoman and a good mother? The question pierced through all her defenses because it contained enough truth to be devastating. Even now, even in this moment of raw honesty, part of her was thinking about how to fix this, how to manage the situation, how to develop a strategy for rebuilding their relationship. I'm going to sell the building, she said suddenly. What? I'm going to sell it today? You're right, it was a crazy thing to do. I'll sell it back to Mr. Chen if he wants it, or find another buyer. You won't have to worry about your psychotic mother being your landlord. Michael studied her face with an expression she couldn't read. Why? Because I want to start over. Not as your landlord. Not as the woman with the corner office and the millions of dollars. Not as someone trying to buy her way back into your life, but as your mother, if you'll let me. For the first time since he'd walked into her office, Michael's expression softened slightly. I don't know if I'm ready for that yet. I understand, but maybe we could start small. Maybe you could come to dinner next week. Not some fancy restaurant where you can hide behind wine pairings and elegant surroundings, just dinner at my place. We could order pizza and talk about normal things, like what kind of music I listen to, or what my girlfriend is like, or why I chose graphic design over the business career you probably assumed I'd pursue. Linda nodded, not trusting her voice. And Mom? I do need one thing from you right now. Anything. I need you to tell me the truth about something. The building. How much did you pay for it? Linda hesitated. That's not important. It is too. Me. I need to understand the scale of the insanity here. $4.2 million? Michael stared at her in stunned silence. You spent $4 million to crash my housewarming party? When he put it like that, it sounded even more insane than it felt. I wasn't thinking clearly. No, Michael said, and to Linda's surprise, he started laughing. Not the bitter laughter from before, but something that sounded almost fond. No, you really weren't. And despite everything, the pain and the anger and the years of distance between them, Linda found herself laughing too. Sarah's going to think you're completely nuts, Michael said, wiping his eyes. Sarah, my girlfriend. Sarah Chen. She's a middle school math teacher. She volunteers at the animal shelter on weekends, and she makes the world's best chocolate chip cookies. She's been wanting to meet you for months, but I kept making excuses because I was afraid you'd either ignore her completely or interrogate her like a job interview. I'd like to meet her, Linda said. If she's willing to meet the woman who bought her boyfriend's building, she might be. She has a pretty good sense of humor about crazy families. Her own mother once drove to 3 different grocery stores to find the perfect avocado for Sarah's birthday guacamole. That sounds almost normal compared to my stunt. Almost, Michael agreed. But Mom, the next time you want to be part of my life, maybe just ask. Maybe just show up with takeout and say you miss me. Maybe just call and ask how I'm doing without having an agenda or a problem to solve. I can try to do that. I hope so, because Sarah really does want to meet you, and I'd like to have a mother I'm not embarrassed to introduce to people. After Michael left, Linda sat alone in her office for a long time, looking out at the city that had given her everything and nothing. She thought about the woman she'd become, powerful, wealthy, successful by every measure that mattered in the business world, and how empty it all felt when your own child saw you as a problem, to be managed rather than a person to be loved. She picked up her phone and called Robert Chen. 3 weeks later, Linda sat on Michael's couch, eating pizza from paper plates and trying not to think about the emails piling up on her phone. The device lay face down on Michael's coffee table, a small but significant gesture that hadn't gone unnoticed by her son. It was their third dinner together, and the conversation was getting easier, though still careful-like to people learning to speak the same language after years of miscommunication. So, the building sold fast, Michael said, picking pepperoni off his slice. He'd started eating his pizza that way when he was 6, and Linda was surprised she remembered. How many other small details had she filed away over the years without realizing their significance? Robert Chen was thrilled to buy it back. I think he was genuinely worried about what kind of owner I'd turn out to be. He probably had visions of me installing security cameras in every hallway and conducting surprise inspections at midnight. Probably smart of him, Michael said with a slight smile. Though I have to admit, Mrs. Rodriguez was kind of disappointed. She was excited about having a rich lady landlord. She thought you might install a fancy new laundry room. I could still do that, Linda offered. As a former crazy building owner, I could make an anonymous donation to building improvements. Please don't. You've done enough dramatic gestures. For 1 decade, they ate in comfortable silence for a while. Michael's apartment felt different now that Linda wasn't seeing it through the lens of her hurt and anger. It was smaller than she'd initially thought, but he'd made it warm and personal in ways her own penthouse had never been. Photos of friends and family covered one wall, including several of him with David and Amanda that Linda had learned to look at without feeling the sharp stab of jealousy that used to accompany such images. Can I ask you something? Michael said eventually, setting down his plate. Of course. What was it like when you were building your company? In the beginning, I mean, before it became this massive thing. Linda set down her pizza, surprised by the question. It had been years since anyone had asked her about the early days. Most conversations about her business focused on current valuations, expansion plans, or exit strategies. It was terrifying, she said slowly. I was 28, freshly divorced, with a 4-year-old son and about $3,000 in savings. I was working 16-hour days from a desk I'd bought at a garage sale set up in the corner of our apartment bedroom. I was dropping you off at daycare at 6 a.m. and picking you up at 7 p.m., and I felt like I was failing at everything simultaneously. But you kept going. I had to. I needed to prove that I could take care of us both, that I didn't need your father's money or anyone else's help, that I could build something from nothing and never be vulnerable again. Michael nodded slowly. I think I understand that now. The fear, when I started freelancing 2 years ago, I was terrified I'd end up broke and have to move back in with Dad. The independence felt crucial, even when it meant eating ramen for dinner 3 nights a week. Is that why you didn't tell me about buying the apartment? You thought I'd judge you for needing help with a down payment? Michael looked uncomfortable, picking at the label on his beer bottle. Dad helped me with some of it. Amanda too, actually. She had some money saved from her previous job that she offered to loan me at 0 interest. Linda felt the familiar pang of being excluded, but this time she tried to examine it instead of react to it. I could have helped too if you'd asked. I know, but when you help with things, it comes with ... expectations. Opinions about how I should live my life, what career moves I should make, why I'm not living up to my potential. When Dad and Amanda helped, it was just help. No strings, no lectures about maximizing my ROI or building equity faster. Do I really do that, Mom? Last Christmas, you asked me when I was going to get a real job at a design firm instead of freelancing. You suggested I apply to Google or Apple, said I was wasting my talent on small projects. You've never once asked me what I actually like about the work I'm doing. Linda cringed, remembering the conversation. She'd thought she was being encouraging, offering valuable career advice. What do you like about it? I get to work with small businesses and nonprofits who can't afford big agencies. Last month, I designed a logo for a woman who started a tutoring program for kids in foster care. The month before that, I helped a veteran create marketing materials for his landscaping business. It's not prestigious, and I'm not making Google money, but it matters to people. That sounds wonderful, really, really. I'm sorry I didn't ask. Before, I'm sorry, I assumed bigger was automatically better. They talked for another hour about his work, his clients, the challenges of freelancing. Linda learned that he wanted to eventually start a design collective that would offer affordable services to community organizations, that he was considering teaching a workshop for small business owners who couldn't afford professional design help, that he measured success not just in dollars but in the impact his work had on people's lives. You know, Linda said as their conversation wound down, I could introduce you to some nonprofit contacts if you're interested. My company does pro bono work for several organizations that might need design help. Michael looked skeptical. You're not going to try to manage my career. I'm offering an introduction, not a hostile takeover, though I reserve the right to brag about your work to people. I suppose I can live with some maternal bragging. When she finally stood to leave, Michael walked her to the door, a small courtesy that felt significant after years of phone conversations that ended abruptly. "Mom, I have something for you." He handed her a small wrapped package. Inside was a simple picture frame containing a photo of the two of them from his college graduation. Linda was in her business suit, checking her phone, but Michael was looking at her with a smile that held so much love and hope that it made her chest ache. "I found this on my computer last week," Michael said. "I always liked it because even though you were distracted, you were there." Linda stared at the photo, remembering that day. She'd been in the middle of a major client crisis and had almost missed the ceremony entirely. Her phone had buzzed constantly throughout the event, and she'd stepped out twice to take calls. "I was on my phone," she said. "But you were there," Michael repeated, "and I want you to know that. That meant something, even when it didn't feel like enough. It meant something." Linda hugged the frame to her chest. "I want to do better, I know, and I want to let you try." As she drove home through the Brooklyn streets, Linda thought about the conversation they'd just had, the longest real talk she'd had with her son in years. She'd learned more about his dreams and fears in one evening than she had in the previous decade. And more importantly, she'd listened without trying to fix or improve or optimize anything over the following months. Linda made changes that felt monumental and terrifying. She delegated more at work, hiring additional senior staff and promoting her VP of operations to handle day-to-day management. For the first time in her career, she established clear boundaries around her availability: no calls after 7 p.m., no meetings on Sunday mornings, no business trips that lasted longer than 4 days. The transition was harder than she'd expected. She found herself reaching for her phone during dinner, checking emails compulsively, creating problems that needed solving just so she could feel indispensable. Her assistant Margaret had to remind her 3 times that she'd delegated client meetings to other team members. "Ms. Morrison," Margaret said gently, after Linda had tried to reschedule a rescheduled meeting for the 3rd time, "perhaps you should consider taking that vacation you've been postponing for 6 years." Instead of a vacation, Linda started therapy with Dr. Patricia Hernandez, a warm woman in her 50s who worked out of a brownstone office that felt like someone's living room. The first session was excruciating. Linda spent 45 minutes explaining why she didn't really need therapy, how she just wanted some tools for better work-life balance, how she was actually quite self-aware and emotionally intelligent. What would happen if you weren't the most successful person in the room? Dr. Hernandez asked during their 3rd session, after Linda had spent another hour deflecting personal questions by discussing business strategies. "I'd lose everything," Linda replied automatically. "What is everything? My security? My independence? My worth? And what would happen if you lost Michael permanently?" Linda couldn't answer that question without crying ugly. Desperate sobs that seemed to come from somewhere she'd kept locked away for decades. The rebuilding was slow and sometimes painful. There were awkward moments when Linda caught herself slipping into old patterns, offering unsolicited advice, turning conversations into business networking opportunities, checking her phone during their dinners. There were misunderstandings, conversations that ended in frustrated silence, evenings when Linda drove home wondering if she was capable of the changes Michael needed from her. But there were also breakthrough moments, like the Saturday morning when Michael called her just to complain about his upstairs neighbor's loud music, or the evening when he texted her a photo of a sunset from his fire escape with no explanation beyond "thought you'd like this." Small moments that felt monumental after years of distance. 4 months after the housewarming disaster, Linda got an unexpected invitation, not to a party, but to meet Sarah over coffee. Michael's girlfriend was petite and energetic, with curly brown hair and the patient manner of someone who spent her days explaining algebra to 13-year-olds. "Michael talks about you a lot," Sarah said over lattes in a Brooklyn cafe that Linda would never have found on her own. "I hope not all of it's terrible." Sarah laughed, a genuine, infectious sound. "Actually, most of it's about how proud he is of what you've built. He shows people articles about your company sometimes, talks about how you started with nothing and created this empire. He wants you to be proud of him too, for who he is, not who you think he should become." "I am proud of him." "No, but he needs to hear it more often. And he needs to hear it about the small things, not just the big achievements. Like when he spent his entire Saturday helping Mrs. Rodriguez set up her new computer, or when he stayed late to finish a logo for that tutoring program because he knew they were launching their website that week." Linda thought about that conversation. For days she started paying attention to Michael's social media posts, not to judge, but to understand. She learned that he volunteered at an animal shelter on weekends, that he was teaching himself guitar, that he'd been featured in a design blog for his work with local nonprofits. She began texting him about these small things. "Saw your post? About the dog adoption event? How did it go?" That logo you designed for the community garden is beautiful. How's the guitar practice coming along? At first, Michael's responses were brief, cautious, but gradually they grew longer. He started sharing more details, asking for her opinion on design concepts, sending her photos of the dogs he was helping to rehabilitate. "Sarah thinks you should come to the shelter sometime," he texted one day. "If you want to see what I do there." Linda did want to see, and the following Saturday found her in a suburban animal shelter wearing jeans and sneakers, a far cry from her usual weekend uniform of designer yoga pants and cashmere sweaters. The shelter was a converted warehouse that smelled of cleaning supplies and wet fur, filled with the sounds of barking dogs and meowing cats. It was chaotic and messy and completely outside Linda's comfort zone. Michael introduced her to the staff. "And volunteers is my mom," a simple phrase that carried more weight than any business title she'd ever held. She watched him work with a nervous rescue dog named Charlie, a German Shepherd mix who had been abused and was afraid of most humans. Michael's patience and gentleness revealed qualities she'd never associated with the serious child she remembered. The boy who had seemed so self-contained and independent, Charlie came in 3 months ago, Michael explained as he slowly approached the dog's kennel. Previous owner used him for fighting, then abandoned him when he got too scared to be aggressive. He wouldn't let anyone touch him for the first month. Linda watched as Michael sat quietly outside the kennel, not reaching for the dog, but simply being present. Slowly, Charlie approached the front of the kennel, his tail wagging tentatively. Michael offered his hand for the dog to sniff, then gently scratched behind Charlie's ears. "He's got a gift," said Maria, the shelter director, joining Linda by the kennel. "The animals trust him immediately. Some of our most traumatized rescues respond to Michael when they won't let anyone else near them. We've had dogs that were practically feral learn to trust humans again because of your son's patience." Linda felt a pride that was different from her usual satisfaction in achievements and acquisitions. This wasn't about success or recognition or building something impressive for the world to admire. This was about Michael's character, his capacity for kindness, the man he'd become despite her failings as a mother. Watching him with Charlie, she saw qualities she'd never fostered or even recognized: empathy, patience, the ability to sit with pain without trying to fix it immediately. The real turning point came 6 months after their first pizza dinner. Linda was in her office late on a Thursday evening reviewing quarterly reports when her phone rang. Michael's name appeared on the screen and something in her chest tightened. He rarely called and never this late. "Mom?" His voice was shaky, tight with panic. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm having a really bad anxiety attack and Sarah's in Philadelphia visiting her sister and I didn't know who else to call." "I'm coming over," Linda said, already grabbing her keys and heading for the elevator. "You don't have to. I'm coming over. Stay on the phone with me." Linda talked to Michael the entire 20-minute drive to Brooklyn, helping him through breathing exercises she'd learned in her own therapy sessions. She coached him through the 4-7-8 technique Dr. Hernandez had taught her, reminded him that panic attacks felt dangerous but weren't. Told him stories about her own struggles with anxiety during the early days of building her company. When she arrived, she found him sitting on his couch, pale and shaking, surrounded by tissues and empty water bottles. Without thinking, she sat beside him and took his hand, something she couldn't remember doing since he was a child. "You're okay," she said, her voice steady and calm despite her own racing heart. "You're safe. I'm here." They sat together until his breathing returned to normal, until the panic faded and he could speak without his voice shaking. Linda didn't try to solve anything or offer advice or ask probing questions about what had triggered the attack. She just stayed present, the way she'd learned to do in therapy, the way she wished she'd known how to do when he was growing up. "Thank you," he said finally, "for coming, for not asking a million questions or trying to fix everything. Thank you for calling me. Dad used to say that your first instinct was always to solve problems instead of just being present with people." Linda felt the familiar defensive response rise, then consciously let it go. He was right. "I'm learning to just be present. It's harder than it looks," Michael said. Double quotes. "Yes, it is." They sat in comfortable quiet for a while, watching late-night traffic move past Michael's windows. The silence felt different from the awkward pauses of their early reconciliation, warmer, more connected. "Mom, can I tell you something? Anything? I was terrified to call you tonight. Not because I thought you wouldn't come, but because I was afraid you'd come and then use it later to prove how much I need you. Like emotional ammunition for future arguments." Linda felt a stab of recognition. "Have I done that before?" "Not exactly, but you keep track of things. You remember every time Dad disappoints me or every mistake I make. And you bring them up later as evidence for whatever point you're trying to make about our family dynamics." "I do that," Linda admitted. "I'm sorry. I know you don't mean to be manipulative." I think you want so badly to be right about things, to win arguments that you save up proof like it's legal evidence. Linda thought about her therapy sessions, about Dr. Hernandez's questions about control and fear. I think I've been scared that if I wasn't constantly proving my value, you'd realize you didn't need me. But that's the thing, Mom. I do need you. Not to solve my problems or prove that you're better than Dad or fix my life. I need you to just ... be my mom. To care about me without needing anything back. I'm learning how to do that. I know. And I can see the difference. Like tonight, a year ago, you would have shown up with a list of anxiety management techniques and the business card for some expensive therapist. Tonight, you just sat with me until I felt better. Is that better? So much better? Linda stayed until after midnight, until Michael felt stable enough to sleep. As she prepared to leave, he hugged Hertha, first real hug they'd shared in years. I love you, Mom, he said simply. I love you too, Linda replied, meaning it in a way that felt different from all the times she'd said those words before. A year later, Collective had organized a showcase of their work with local nonprofits. The walls were covered with logos, websites, and marketing materials that told stories of small organizations doing meaningful work in their communities. The presentation boards showed before and after comparisons, testimonials from grateful clients, and statistics about the Collective's impact on local businesses and charities. Michael was across the room, explaining his design process to a group of potential clients. He wore dark jeans and a button-down shirt that Sarah had helped him pick out, and he spoke with confidence about his work and his vision for accessible design. He caught Linda's eye and smiled, not the careful, guarded smile of their early reconciliation, but a genuine expression of joy at seeing her there. He's been talking about this event for weeks, Sarah said, appearing at Linda's elbow. Making sure you knew about it, asking if you thought you'd be able to come. It means a lot to him that you're here. I wouldn't miss it. A year ago, he wouldn't have expected you to show up? Now he plans these things assuming you'll be there. That's a huge change. Linda watched her son, animated and passionate, as he talked about a logo he'd designed for a literacy program. She noticed how he listened carefully to questions, how he made eye contact with each person who spoke to him, how he seemed genuinely interested in understanding their needs rather than just selling his services. Linda, she turned to see Janet approaching with a glass of wine and a surprised expression. This is incredible. I had no idea Michael was doing work like this. He's talented, Linda said simply, resisting the urge to launch into a detailed explanation of his business model or future plans. And happy. I haven't seen him this happy in years. You know, David and Amanda are here somewhere. They're blown away by all this. David keeps telling people that Michael gets his creative vision from you. Linda spotted them near the back of the room, studying a display about sustainable design practices. David caught her eye and nodded respectfully. Their interactions had evolved from openly hostile to professionally cordial, united in their shared pride in Michael's accomplishments. Amanda waved with genuine warmth. Their relationship had surprised Linda by developing into something approaching friendship, built on their mutual love for Michael and Sarah. As the evening wound down, Linda helped Michael and Sarah pack up the display materials. It was a small thing, but she'd learned that small things mattered, that showing up, helping out, and being present counted for more than grand gestures or expensive gifts. Good turnout, Linda said, carefully folding one of the presentation banners. Better than I expected. We might actually get some new clients out of this, and the Collective could expand to include some of the other freelancers who've been interested in joining. You should be proud. Michael paused in his packing, looking around the room where a few stragglers were still examining the displays. I am, and Mom, thanks for being here, for everything. Thank you for letting me be here. As they loaded boxes into Linda's car, she'd offered to help transport everything back to Michael's apartment, he said. Sarah and I are thinking about getting married next year. Linda's heart jumped with excitement, but she kept her voice steady. That's wonderful news. She's perfect for you. We want a small wedding, nothing fancy. Probably just family and close friends in the community garden where we had our first official date. That sounds lovely. Michael grinned, and Linda could see the boy he'd been in his expression. You're definitely invited this time. Linda laughed, remembering the housewarming disaster that had brought them to this moment. I should hope so. And Mom, I want you to know that when Sarah and I have kids someday, I want them to know their grandmother, the real you, not just the successful businesswoman version. Linda felt tears threaten, the good kind that came from overwhelming gratitude rather than pain. I'd like that too. I want them to see that their grandmother is someone who made mistakes but learned how to change. Someone who built an empire but figured out that relationships matter more than revenue. Someone who's strong enough to admit when she's wrong and brave enough to do the hard work of becoming better. As she drove home through the Brooklyn streets that had become familiar over the past year, Linda thought about the woman she'd been when this journey started, desperate to buy her way back into her son's life, wielding money and power like weapons against her own loneliness. She thought about the building she'd purchased and quickly sold, the millions of dollars spent on a gesture that had solved nothing and nearly destroyed everything. The real work had been much smaller and much harder. Learning to listen without fixing, showing up without expectation, loving without keeping score. Building trust through consistency rather than grand gestures. Accepting that being a good mother wasn't about providing perfectly, but about being present imperfectly. Her phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Thanks for helping tonight." "Love you, Mom." She pulled over to respond. "Love you too. So proud of the man you've become." A follow-up text appeared. "So proud of the woman you're becoming too." As she sat in her car on a quiet Brooklyn street, Linda realized that, for the first time in years, she felt truly wealthy, not because of her bank account or her corner office or her successful company, but because she had something that couldn't be bought or sold or lost in a market crash. She had her son's love, freely given and carefully earned. She had a relationship, built not on obligation or guilt, but on genuine affection and mutual respect. She had become not just a successful woman, but a good mother, and she was still learning how to be an even better one. 3 months later, Sarah called Linda on a Tuesday evening. "I need your help with something," she said without preamble. "I want to surprise Michael with something for his birthday, and I think you're the only person who can help me pull it off." "What did you have in mind?" "He's been talking about wanting to expand the collective, maybe find a permanent space where they could work and also offer workshops to the community. I found a perfect location, but the deposit and first month's rent are more than I can handle on a teacher's salary." Linda felt the old impulse to solve everything with money, followed immediately by caution. "What kind of help are you thinking?" "Not a gift," Sarah said quickly. "A loan. With interest, payment plan, the whole thing. I want to present it to him as something we're doing together, not something your money is making possible. But I need a partner to make the numbers work." Linda smiled, understanding why Michael had fallen in love with this woman. "I'd be honored to be your business partner. There's one more thing. I want us to keep your involvement quiet until after we present it to him. I don't want him to think this is you trying to control his business decisions. That's probably wise." A month later, Linda sat in the back of a small storefront in Brooklyn, watching Michael's face as Sarah led him through the space she'd secretly rented. Exposed brick walls, large windows, room for workstations, and a small classroom area. Michael's eyes grew wider as Sarah explained her vision: a permanent home for the design collective. A place where they could offer affordable services and also teach design skills to community members. "How did you... How are we affording this?" Michael asked, looking stunned. "I have a business partner," Sarah said, gesturing toward Linda. "Your mom agreed to help with the loan, but this is my project. Our project, if you want it to be." Michael looked between them, his expression cycling through surprise, confusion, and then something that looked like understanding. "You two have been plotting," he said. "Collaborating," Linda corrected. "And only because Sarah asked. This was entirely her idea." Michael walked through the space again, touching the walls, looking out the windows, envisioning possibilities. Finally, he turned back to them with tears in his eyes. "This is perfect," he said. "This is everything I've been dreaming about." As they stood together in the empty storefront, Linda, Michael, and Sarah planning how to transform the space into something meaningful, Linda realized that this was what family felt like. Not perfect, not without complications, but genuine. Built on love and trust and the willingness to show up for each other, even when it was inconvenient or uncertain. 6 months later, the Morrison Community Design Studio opened its doors, offering both professional design services and free workshops to local residents. The space had been transformed into something warm and welcoming: exposed brick walls, painted in soft colors, large windows that filled the room with natural light, workstations equipped with computers and design software, and a comfortable seating area where clients could review projects over coffee. Linda attended the opening celebration not as the primary financial backer, but as Michael's mother and Sarah's business partner. She watched her son teach a logo design workshop to a group of small business owners, sharing his knowledge and passion with people who reminded her of herself 30 years ago, scared, hopeful, and trying to build something from nothing first. "Let's talk about what makes a logo memorable," Michael was saying to the group of 8 entrepreneurs gathered around a large table. "It's not about being fancy or complicated. Some of the world's most successful brands have incredibly simple logos. Think about Nike's Swoosh or Apple's Apple. What matters is that it represents something meaningful about your business. Linda watched as he helped a woman named Rosa design a logo for her catering business, guiding her through questions about her target customers. Her unique selling points, the feeling she wanted people to have when they saw her brand. His approach was patient and collaborative, nothing like the hyper-sure sales tactics she was used to in the corporate world. "You did good," David said, appearing beside her with Amanda and their own contribution to the celebration it catered. Lunch from a local restaurant they'd discovered and fallen in love with. "We all did good," Linda replied, and she meant it. Looking around the room, she saw not just Michael's achievement but a community effort, Sarah's organizational skills, David and Amanda's financial contribution, her own business experience, even Janet's help with publicity through her social media connections. As she looked around the room at Michael teaching, at Sarah managing the logistics with easy competence, at the community members engaging enthusiastically with the workshops, Linda felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with business success or financial achievement. The studio was already booking its first paid clients. But more importantly, it was serving its community. Mrs. Rodriguez had signed up for a digital literacy class. The graduate student from Michael's building was learning web design. A local nonprofit had hired the collective to redesign their fundraising materials. This wasn't just a business. It was a bridge between Michael's skills and his community's needs. She had learned, finally, that the best investments weren't measured in dollars but in relationships. That the most valuable thing she could build wasn't a company but a family. And that sometimes the most powerful thing you could purchase wasn't a building but the wisdom to know when to let go of control and trust in love instead. Her phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Thanks for being here. Mom, thanks for helping make this possible." She typed back, "Thanks for teaching me what really matters." Looking around the room one more time, at her son's joy, at Sarah's pride, at the community members discovering new skills and possibilities, Linda Morrison knew she had finally found her way home.